As you know, the North Dakota Association of Counties did pass a resolution opposing Measure 5, but we want you guys to have all the information that you need to make your decision come our election in November. So we put together a very diverse panel for you. First of all, our moderator is Tom Gerhardt with the KX Network. John Godfread with the Greater Chamber, who is with the North Dakotans for Common Sense Conservation. Next to him is Senator Kelly Armstrong of Dickinson. Ron Anderson, as you guys know, is the McKenzie County Commissioner. Carmen Miller with Ducks Unlimited for those that are for the Clean Water, Wildlife, and Parks Amendment. Senator Connie Triplett from Grand Forks. And Gabe Brown, a local farmer rancher. Thank you guys for being here. I'll give you a little snapshot of what our format will look like today. We're going to give them each 3 minutes to give a brief statement on their views on this issue. They'll each have 3 minutes, and then Tom will ask a few questions. If you have a question, we want you to ask it. We have a mic to pass around. Stand up, raise your hand, whatever. We'll get you a mic. We'll take questions from you, and then they'll decide which one of them from each side will answer the question. If there's no questions from the audience, Tom will start rolling off some of his hard questions. So at about 11:05, when we have about 10 minutes to wrap up, we'll let them give a 1-minute brief wrap-up statement on how they feel about the issue and their perspective on it. All right, we'll let the fun begin.
I guess I'm the lucky one who gets to start. Thanks to Nell and thanks to the Association of Counties and KX for putting this on and having a chance to discuss this, what I think is probably the most important ballot measure that we'll see this election. At least it has a chance to be have the biggest fiscal impact on our state that we've seen in some time. As Danelle said, I'm John Godfread with the Greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the chairman for the North Dakotans for Common Sense Conservation. That's a coalition that has been formed with industry, business, education, agriculture, local and state elected officials have all come together to oppose Measure 5. Just to give you a sense of kind of who we are, we represent over 360,000 farmers and landowners, 288,000 employees, 30,000 families, 10,000 businesses, 1,700 state and local officials, 300 cities, 55 conservation districts, and all 53 counties. So we're a very broad and diverse coalition that have come together to oppose Measure 5. Some of the main reasons we oppose Measure 5, there's many. I think the first one is that it's a constitutional measure, and kind of backing up, I guess, a little bit. Measure 5 is the measure that would take 5% of the oil extraction tax and divert it into a conservation fund that's overseen by a 13-member unelected board. So we've got some issues there. Within the measure itself, it calls for that 5%. The proponents will tell you that that's just a little bit of money, and we can certainly afford to do that. I guess I look at my local and state elected officials and what they're telling me, and they're the ones who work with our budgets every day like you do, that it's going to be a choice. We can either choose to vote for Measure 5 and support Measure 5, or we can choose to continue to invest in our infrastructure, continue to invest in our education, continue to invest in North Dakota. So I think this election is coming down to a very clear choice of what's before you. I think we all support conservation. The North Dakotans for Common Sense Conservation we were originally formed to develop the Outdoor Heritage Fund. That's a fund that has $30 million put into it to address conservation needs. I also serve on that board, and I can tell you we've done some great projects with that, and that's the right way to go. It's a statutory fund. It can be moved up and down as our needs see fit. What you have before you in Measure 5 is simply swinging the pendulum way too far one direction. We looked at if this measure were in place today for this biennium, it would have created the 6th largest state agency. It would be funding conservation ahead of North Dakota State University. It'd fund conservation at about 3 to 4 times what we put into Highway Patrol. And simply, I think everybody in North Dakota, we like our outdoors, we take care of our outdoors. We're an agriculture state. Farmers and ranchers are the first and best conservationists. I mean, they're the ones who live off the land. So to all of a sudden swing the pendulum so far one direction, we think is a real big mistake for North Dakota. And I guess we'll get into that more as we go on, but I think I'm going to turn it over to Carmen now, I think, for her side.
Well, my name's Carmen Miller, and I'm a native North Dakotan. I grew up in Minot, and I've lived in Bismarck now for about 21 years. My family's been in business in North Dakota for 60 years. And like most of us in the room, we've seen a lot of different North Dakotas over time. We've seen the North Dakota of the past, which certainly had its ups and downs. We're living right now in the North Dakota of the present, which is exciting and filled with opportunity. And the question we're all asking is, what's the North Dakota of the future going to look like? Measure 5 is about the North Dakota of the future. You know, I feel really fortunate to be living in a unique moment in time in North Dakota when we have unprecedented economic opportunity. You know, the oil boom has done great things for the state of North Dakota. And what we really have is a once in statehood opportunity to take some of that revenue and set it aside for maintaining our future quality of life. Measure 5 is not about Ducks Unlimited. It's about communities. It's about park boards, school boards, individual schools, cities, counties, local park districts, and the type of critical quality of life infrastructure that we need to make the communities a place where people want to stay and bring their families and continue to live their lives. I want to give you just a couple of examples. Is anybody here from Ward County? Ward County? Well, I'm from Ward County, up in Minot. Ward County Park Board submitted a couple of applications to the Outdoor Heritage Fund, a $700,000 project that would have created a multi-use path between the edge of Minot and the city of Velva. Also a much smaller project, $7,500 for bathrooms and office space at Old Settlers Park. Bowman County Weed Board, anybody here from Bowman County? Okay, your weed board submitted a proposal for sort of a livestock grazing, noxious weed control project. Would have been a great project, $14,000, also not funded by the Outdoor Heritage Fund. Anybody from Williams County here? Williams County Water Resource District. You all had a project, $933,000 for paving for Whitetail Bay. Let's see, Cavalier County. Is anybody here from Cavalier County? The Water Resource District there submitted a proposal for what they described as a dilapidated bathhouse. A bathhouse that it was in such bad shape that it was actually a safety hazard at Mount Carmel Dam. Every one of these, this is just an example of some of the projects that have not been able to be funded. Every single one of these projects is eligible for funding under Measure 5. Every county in this room is a potential grantee under Measure 5. You know, Measure 5 is a resource for you all. And it can help you build the types of communities that I know you all want so badly to build. In our current very fortunate economic situation in North Dakota, we don't have to make false choices between clean water and schools. We can do all of these things and do them well.
My name's Kelly Armstrong. I'm a state senator from District 36, which is the rural area surrounding Dickinson, North Dakota. I've lived in western North Dakota my whole life, except for a 10-year span where I lived in Grand Forks, miss Grand Forks sometimes. I'm an avid hunter and outdoorsman. Our family ranches and farms in southwest North Dakota. I'm also I'm involved in the oil business, and I'm a lawyer, so have a pretty broad base of experience when it comes to this issue. My problem with the conservation measure is it prioritizes conservation above everything else. There is no flexibility, there's no debate. It takes the money off the top of the general fund. It goes away, it's mandated to go away, and everybody else is left with the remainder. That money comes out before school funding, infrastructure funding, higher ed funding, human service funding. And to give you an idea why that's important, just a list of some of the people who are against it. It's the Farm Bureau, the Grain Growers Association, the Stockmen's Association, Farm Credit, Farmers Union, Corn Growers, Soybean Growers, Durham Growers, the League of Cities, the Association of Counties, the Association of School Administrators, and Landowners Association, and the North Dakota Landowners Association. And in my belief, you cannot have a real conservation program in North Dakota without those groups buying in. Mr. Godfread said it before. Our farmers and ranchers are the consummate conservationists. Private property owners in North Dakota care about the land. They care about the hunting, they care about the ag, they care about their community, and they care about taking care of North Dakota. But this money, the proposal to this is everybody believes conservation is a good idea, but this says give us, according to OMB's numbers, $308 million over the next biennium, and we'll spend it. We have a lot of ideas, but there's no specific plan. And we'll buy state parks, we'll build bathhouses, we'll do these things. But typically when you come to the legislature for a state park, you say, hey, I've got 47 acres in northwest North Dakota that we have talked to a landowner and he would be willing to work with us to put a state park here. It's in a great spot. It offsets the north unit of the Teddy Roosevelt National Park, and we'd like to propose that to the state of North Dakota. Here's how much it's going to cost to buy. Here's how much it's going to cost to reclimate. Here's how much it's going to cost to maintain. Those aren't the kind of plans and proposals that are being offered with this. What are offered are this group of feel-good ideas with nothing specific. Bring specific things to the legislature will hear them, and then they will balance them versus tax relief, school funding, and we will have an open and honest debate about where that fits in the priority. With this, it'll come off the top, and those dollars will be spent before we ever talk about any of the other critical infrastructure needs that are facing North Dakota.
My name is Connie Triplett. It's good to be back at the North Dakota Association of Counties. Some of you long-timers will recognize me as a former Grand Forks County Commissioner. I served the County of Grand Forks from 1992 until 2008. And I appreciate local government, and I appreciate what all of you do. I have not been part of the coalition or the committee that worked on this measure. I got involved very recently and very late in the game because I kept hearing people say that all of the legislators were against it, and I see letters to the editor saying you'd be hard-pressed to find a single legislator in support. So that kind of drew me out of my closet, and I had to say, here's a legislator who is in support. I currently represent District 18 from Grand Forks in the North Dakota Senate, where I've been since 2003. I want to offer some history and some perspective on the oil tax situation in North Dakota. I hope that all of you in the room know this, but some of you may be new and some of you may be from the eastern part of the state, and so I'm just going to review a little bit of very basic history. There are two oil taxes in North Dakota. The first one is called the gross production tax. It's a 5% tax on oil produced in North Dakota. It's been in existence since 1953, shortly after oil was discovered in North Dakota. It's been interpreted by the legislature and the courts as an in lieu of property tax. It was intended as a substitute for property tax in the oil-impacted region of the state. Measure 5 is not about the gross production tax. It does not touch that tax. The second oil tax is called the extraction tax. That's where the 5% would come from for this conservation fund. That is a 6.5% tax on oil produced in North Dakota, and it was specifically authorized by a vote of the people in 1980 when they approved an initiated constitutional measure creating the tax. It was intended to benefit the state as a whole and is not limited to the oil-producing areas. Measure 5 dedicates a piece of that, and the reason I want you to understand the distinction between these two oil taxes is because there are those people who would say that the good citizens of North Dakota should not be trusted to make a decision about the allocation of any significant amount of dollars. But anyone who says that has either forgotten or never knew that the extraction tax simply would not exist if the voters had not passed Measure 6 back in 1980. It is my very considered opinion as a political scientist, a lawyer, and a legislator, and a former county commissioner that there has never been the legislative will to increase taxes on the oil industry at any point in time between 1980 and today. If the citizens of North Dakota had not approved the extraction tax, the $4.4 billion that has been collected to date would never have been part of the state budget. I think that you have an obligation to leave this decision to the voters of the people and not be making group decisions as the Association of Counties has.
Hi, are we on here? Good enough. Hi, I'm Ron Anderson. I'm a farmer rancher, McKenzie County Commissioner. Deep in the oil patch, believe me. I think it's kind of humorous today that the embracement of the oil industry that the proponents of this bill have, they really haven't embraced them in the past, but now it's a good deal. I guess when I first looked at this, I'm a little bit, we're going to repeat ourselves. I think it's a little bit arrogant of the proponents to come out here and say, okay, we're going to put this in the Constitution. To heck with you guys that are involved with human services, with water issues, with money coming back to counties. To heck with you guys. We want ours first. You can go and grovel for yours in the end. I think this system that we have, this legislative system, you don't always agree with it. It's been working since 1889 when the state was formed, and I think we should leave it that way. They should be the ones to do the appropriating. I don't like the board. A 13-member board, and that you have to have a background in land conservation or conservation activism. Frankly, that scares the hell out of me. I think it should be a more objective board. And they counter with, well, it's going to go to the Industrial Commission for a vote of 3 elected officials. They have to spend 80 or 75% of the money. So whether it's a good opportunity or not, it has to be spent. You know, they're talking about $300 million for this next biennium. Think about if that goes to, as it's been predicted in the state, doubling production. That'll be $600 million a biennium. I just want to read a letter I got from Forrest Gross, Regional Director of Ducks Unlimited. Mr. Anderson, I'd like to reiterate the funding for the amendment will not detract from the money allocated to schools and roads, which both draw their funding from the oil production tax. We would draw our money from the state's oil extraction tax, which is largely unallocated. Largely unallocated? Not a chance. Here is the allocation in the extraction tax. 30% legacy fund, 20% resources trust fund, 10% common school trust fund, 10% foundation aid stabilization fund, strategic investment and improvement fund, which we're hoping to get money from for the whole state for improvement of infrastructure. So, folks, the money is allocated. Thank you.
Hello. My name's Gabe Brown, and I'm a rancher, lifelong resident of North Dakota, and a supporter of Measure 5. I'm here today for one reason, and that reason is that I care. I care about what's going to happen to our resources, what's here for our children and our grandchildren. You know, the opponents of this measure would like you to believe that farmers and ranchers are the greatest conservationists. Yes, they are conservationists, but answer me this. If they're such great conservationists, then how come the organic matter levels in our state have dropped over 75% in the last 50 years? What difference does that make? Organic matter levels have to do everything with nutrient density of our foods. The nutrient densities of the foods we have produced have fallen precipitously over the last 50 years. What does that have to do with our townships, our cities? Water holding capacity of soils is critical for flood control. Folks, if we don't start paying attention, what's going to be left for our children and grandchildren? I look at this measure, and I don't see how anyone who can possibly care can vote no.
Okay. There are a lot of good questions that I have before me, but even from my perspective, there are a couple of things that I would like answered. And the first question, I think, is definitely one for both sides. Again, I'm Tom Gerhardt from KXMB TV here in Bismarck. The question, and maybe, John, you could tackle this one right away, because I think there's some confusion with it in the people I talk to, and it deals with purchasing land in North Dakota. It seems like there are a lot of people that think a lot of land may be gobbled up with this money. A question again for both sides, is this true or not?
Well, I guess I'd encourage everybody to one, read the measure for sure, and you'll see it, it's right in there. They can use this money to acquire land. I guess our big concern is that when you've got the ability to acquire land, and we've got the corporate farming law in North Dakota, and the proponents will talk about that, the governor's kind of the final stopgap. This is a constitutional measure. You know, and I went to law school, and I'm sure Kelly's up here as an attorney, and Senator Triplett is as well. Constitutional amendments trump statutory amendments. So at the very least, it calls it into question. And at the same time, the proponents of this measure are also working in the courts to overturn our corporate farming law. So you'll hear from their side saying, we're not in it to buy land, we're not here to buy land, that's not what we want to do. during the while, they're working behind the scenes to, 1, overturn the law, 2, it says it right in the measure, and 3, you're going to use North Dakota taxpayer dollars to then compete against your agriculture community. It's a real big concern of ours. We don't think that these taxpayer dollars should be injected into the land purchase, market. We think that creates an unfair disadvantage, and it disadvantages our young farmers and ranchers and those people that are trying to either expand their operations or what have you. And we believe it should be kept into private hands, and I guess that's what we stand for, and that's our big concern. You'll hear, like I said, you'll hear from the proponents that they're not here to buy land, but all their actions are indicating otherwise.
I can respond to that a little bit, and maybe Gabe, as a farmer, you might want to add something to this as well. First of all, I'm also a lawyer. I usually don't lead with that, but so you're lucky to have, yeah, either you're lucky or unlucky to have 3 lawyers up here. And I also would encourage everybody to actually read the ballot measure. Over and over again, I have conversations with people, and here's an example. I had a conversation with a gentleman, a businessman from Dickinson, who said, who I've known for many years, and he said, well, I wasn't so sure about this, but then I read the thing, and gee, it sounds like it looks, all of the concerns are addressed right there in the text of the measure. I love the fact that the Industrial Commission makes the final decisions. It's really important to remember this is a granting fund. It is nothing more, it does nothing more than establish a fund for voluntary granting programs. When you talk about the possibility of land acquisition, we may never see those types of projects proposed. We may never see them approved. Every grant proposal has to be approved by the Industrial Commission, the Attorney General, the Governor, and the Ag Commissioner. In fact, this also does nothing to change North Dakota's existing very restrictive laws governing the acquisition of agricultural land by nonprofit organizations. If a nonprofit organization were to propose a grant application that involved a land acquisition, it would have to be approved by the governor twice. And also I want to get, if you read the measure, you find also the advisory board also includes 4 additional legislators. Farmers, ranchers, a broad section of people who are going to be involved in this decision making. And we have a high level of confidence in their ability to manage this fund in accordance with the views of North Dakotans. This is not, a likely scenario. What's being proposed here is just not a likely scenario.
Gabe, did you want to weigh in?
I'll weigh in later.
Another issue I wanted both of you to address is this, the measure with the, I guess how you look at it, the spending or allocating mandate. As has been mentioned this morning, $300 million or so is sort of anticipated for this first biennium. Both sides please address this issue and the amount of money that would be going back into projects in North Dakota.
I can address that. It's important to remember that this is based on a percentage. It's 5% of existing oil and gas extraction revenue. This is not a new tax. It doesn't raise taxes on anybody, including the oil industry. These are already existing funds. Because it's a percentage, it will rise and fall over time. Honestly, we could all attempt to predict this, and we could all be wrong. OMB, which is the official budget agency of the state of North Dakota, whose projections we have always relied on, came up with a new estimate of this based on current production, current oil prices, and for the next biennium estimates this at about $130 million a year. Again, this will rise and fall over time, and that's what's important to remember. It's going to change with our economy.
In terms of just thinking about the dollars, I think one of the things that you need to realize is that North Dakota is, as Carmen said, in a very special place right now with an exciting future. And I want to rebut something that Ron said, that that those of us who favor this never appreciated the oil industry before. I think that I have been a friend to the oil industry in my time in the legislature. I don't think I have done anything to make any effort to slow the oil industry down in North Dakota. So this has nothing to do with the oil industry. It's about tax allocation. And I think we have all come to be so reliant in North Dakota during our decades of poverty that we don't even really know how much some of this stuff costs. When you consider just like the federal CRP program that used to dump, routinely well over $100 million a year into North Dakota, in direct payments to farmers. And as the federal CRP program diminishes because of lack of federal funds, it would be really nice if we in North Dakota could step up and basically replicate that kind of a program in North Dakota. And that's certainly one of the potential uses of that. And you could easily spend $100 million a year and have it all go to a state-run CRP-like program with dollars to farmers. So, you know, this is not about a land grab. This is about land stewardship in a variety of ways, protecting our land and our water for the benefit of the future of North Dakota.
Ron?
Being the oldest one here, I have a little memory of, I came to the legislature in 1981 after Measure 6 had been passed, the oil extraction tax. That was fine, the people passed that, but they also passed mandated funding like this has in it. We spent the next 2 decades digging out of that hole for other organizations that needed money because the money never came in. I think the money's going to come in here, yes, but just be careful of putting mandates in there, and sometimes the money doesn't show up.
The amount of money that goes into this fund is based on the oil extraction tax. It's based on the price of a barrel of oil and the amount of production. It has nothing to do with the need for conservation. So that whether the fund grows or shrinks is based on 2 international volatile commodities and the amount of production that is going on in North Dakota. And as the fund gets bigger on a biennium basis, 75% of that has to be spent. And there is no prohibition in this legislation to ban the sale of land. So when you have oversight of the Industrial Commission and they are required by the Constitution to spend at least 75% of it, that's not real oversight. It's a false choice. If you get 27 bad ideas that spend the money and one good idea, and one good idea only spends 5% of the money, you have 95% of the money you are required by law to spend. So the oversight is non-existent. And eventually, as this fund grows, depending on the things, without the prohibition of this purchase of land in this measure, I don't see how they can't. I don't know how they will spend it in year 10 and in year 12 and in year 24.
I'd like to respond to a couple of those things. First of all, the allegation of the 75% spending requirement. Again, I would encourage people to actually read the ballot language because it's simply not what it says. It doesn't say 75% has to be spent, granted, awarded, appropriated. The term used is allocate, and that allocation could include allocation to the trust. I'm going to give you sort of a real-world analogy. Let's say most of us these days have a checking account and a savings account. You have a job, you may have direct deposit, and a certain percentage of your check goes to your savings account, the rest goes to your checking account. You get to the end of the month, you have money left in your checking account, you don't have to spend it. You can put the rest of it back into the savings account. It's the same concept here. And I mean, this is a mischaracterization of the ballot, of the language that really, I mean, does not, the Industrial Commission has quite a bit more discretion here. They don't have to spend any money that they don't want to. They can put this into the savings mechanism. They have quite a bit more discretion here than is being characterized.
Well, I'm just going to tag on to that too real quick. There's, if you think there's a difference between allocate and spend, you know, I guess we have some talking to do. This measure, the proponents of this measure, if you really think that they're not going to spend this money, again, I don't know what to tell you. They've been up here talking about we need to fund bathhouses, we need to fund all these little things. So they've got plenty of ideas with no real plans behind it, and they put the spending mandate within this measure in order to get the access to those funds. Their concern was that if they have this measure and they pass it and the Industrial Commission is the overseer of it, what if they sit on the money? Well, now they got the spending mandate in there, so now they can get what they want. Also, within this this measure and what some of the projects I think are what they're looking to do, the proponents of this measure are looking for this money for. You know, they want to use this for staffing. They want to use this for research. They want to use this for overhead within their organizations. Frankly, I'm a firm believer that North Dakota taxpayer dollars probably shouldn't be spent on those type of things in nonprofits. That's what your member dollars are for. That's why people used to belong to DU. That's why they used to belong to Pheasants Forever, to help fund those type of issues. When you add in the, like I said, when you add in the spending mandate, to get to your question, Tom, there is no oversight. You've got a choice between the governor, the Ag Commissioner, and the Attorney General will have to make a choice. Do you fund these bad projects, or these projects that reach that 75% threshold, or do you go violate the Constitution and then get sued by the very proponents that are pushing this measure? So.
All right, Senator Triplett.
I'd like to take a
quickly,
shot
yeah.
at Mr. Godfread's invitation to a conversation about allocating versus spending. There absolutely is a distinction. The North Dakota legislature does it all the time. We have allocated in advance money for the Red River Basin project, which has never been authorized by the federal government. That you will recognize it as the redefinition of garrison diversion if you think that far back, moving the water from the Missouri River to the Red River Valley. It has not happened yet. It's been planned by the citizens by the state of North Dakota for a long, long time. No federal authorization, no formal plan, and yet we put hundreds of thousands of dollars every single legislative session we stash into a fund so that we can help pay for it when it gets to that point. We have done that in a variety of water projects across time where we put money aside in one biennium and don't spend it until some future thing happens so that it doesn't hit us all at once. So yes, absolutely, it's done all the time. And I'd like to use one more example to make that point. Mr. Anderson talked about the allocation of the extraction tax, and one of the things he referenced was the Strategic Investment and Infrastructure Fund. That is a very specific fund that was just created by the legislature a couple of sessions ago, and it was created by legislators who are still living in fear and denial because of their trauma from the oil bust in the 1980s. And I understand how traumatic that was for people in western North Dakota when the oil went away in the 1980s. But this is an entirely different play, and it's time for our legislature to understand that. The SIF fund, as it's called, is really a policy that is designed for a declining economy, not a growing economy. What it does is it takes part of the money that comes in a given biennium and puts it in a little lockbox and says, we're not going to spend this until the next biennium. And so that $800,000 that Senator Wardner and Senator Armstrong and their friends are offering up in the first month of the next session, that's money that they all knew was coming in this session that they could have appropriated last time, and they chose not to. So it's because of the incredible conservatism of our North Dakota legislature not believing that this oil play is for real, that they have put money aside, chosen not to spend it, while all of you in the western North Dakota are suffering because you can't get enough money for your infrastructure. These are false choices. The money is there. It is sitting in funds that the legislature refuses to allocate. There is enough money for education and everything else that could be spent in North Dakota if the legislature finds the will to spend it. It hasn't happened yet. Go talk to your legislators.
All right, we're going to take some questions from our audience. I know we have one there. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone around to you. Sir, if you could give us your name and your question, please.
I guess I'm just trying to get a grasp on this 5%. Are you asking for 5 of the 6.5% or 5% of the whole thing? Yeah, 5%, you know. Is it 5% of the 6.5% or is it 5 of the 6.5%?
It's 5% just of the extraction side. It's extraction only. This has nothing to do with the production tax.
Like 80% of the entire tax.
No.
Okay, it's 5%
exactly.
of the 6.5.
Right. And like I said, this is a percentage. It will rise and fall over time. And what is invested in these types of projects, and by the way, John referred to the bathhouses as our projects. Those are your projects. The projects that your counties submitted that you guys have seen as critical quality of life infrastructure. Those are not Ducks Unlimited's projects.
You know, and I guess I just think, well, if we're going to spend this money and we do spend it in the community, that money is going to, you know, go over many times into your lumber yards, into your people to do the work and things like that too. So I mean, you have to look at that side.
Absolutely. Does this type of investment have a trickle down in the economy? And you know, you raise a good point. tourism is the third largest sector of North Dakota's economy. It's really the third leg of North Dakota's economic stool, and it's based on outdoor recreation, hunting and fishing, and the types of things that we all love to do. Now, in spite of that, it's a sector of the economy that's really been neglected in terms of funding for many years. And what this does is gives us an opportunity to sort of catch up and put the resources towards those types of things that really invest in our quality of life for the future. This is an important sector of the economy that's historically been underfunded. We have not established a new state park in North Dakota in 30 years. And we're one of the fastest growing states in the country. We've got new families moving here every day, families like mine that have been living here for a long time, and they need parks, they need trails, they need walking paths and bike paths, types of things that make people want to stay here.
We have another question from the audience.
I'm a commissioner from Steele County. I'm also a farmer in Steele and Trail County. I've been on the park board for about a dozen years. The CRP program you're talking about, I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, as a farmer, how would I know that this is coming in play? Or, I mean, the same token on this funding. I mean, we've submitted grants for different projects from our park board, and I mean, where would we hear that this is going to be available for us?
That's a great question. You know, I take exception to Mr. Godfrey and Mr. Armstrong saying that farmers and ranchers are against this. No, not all of us are against it. I have received literally hundreds of phone calls since I came on board supporting this measure. Some opposed to the measure, some for it. But let me tell you this, after I explain the facts, and I'm talking facts, to them, over 90% of the producers I've talked to are in favor of this measure. Why? It's because what this gentleman asked. There is a myriad of opportunity here for farmers and ranchers to advance conservation measures on their lands, whether it be noxious weed control, whether it be filter strips, waterways for clean water, whether it be a working lands program. And that's one thing about this. These grant applications are going to be working lands programs with rules made up by North Dakotans. Those applying for the grant will write the rules into them. One of the problems we've seen over the years with the CRP program is that it doesn't allow hay in our grazing. There's a real opportunity that with this type of program, it would be allowed, and we can take care of that land instead of seeing it become a noxious weed mess. Okay? Remember a few years ago, there was a drought in southwestern North Dakota. One of the big pushes, there was legislatures trying to get passed funding for water developments. Okay, a big part of this program is clean water, wildlife. What goes along with that? Proper grazing management. You know, there's a real opportunity for grants to be made to this board for water development, for grazing system. How about you look at one of the big problems? One of the questions I get often asked is, what about all the lands that are flooded? You know, I talked to a producer in Bottineau County who hasn't had a crop on his cropland for 5 years, simply because of the water problems. Well, one of the real opportunities, and those of you involved in production agriculture have heard the buzzword soil health, and how do we advance soil health? One of the ways we do that is with cover crops. There's a real opportunity for the producers in this state to get monies allocated for improving and advancing soil health. This will not only put more dollars in their pocket, it'll improve the wildlife habitat, and it'll be clean water for future generations. There's real opportunities here. The grants will be out there. It's just a matter of these agencies, including North Dakota Soil Conservation Districts, others, to apply for them.
Any other questions?
We'd like a little response
Oh,
to
yes, Senator Armstrong.
Just to start, just to be clear, I am sure there are farmers and ranchers in favor of this. What I was saying is that every major farm, livestock, and community group in North Dakota with any organization has come out against this. And I know John Godfread has something to say as well.
Well, I can be short and sweet. You know, I think we've talked about a lot of different programs. We don't need a constitutional amendment with mandated spending in it to accomplish any of that. I can't think of a public policy that would make sense to mandate spending within our Constitution at the level that we're talking about. I guess I'd look at you know, those of you out in the western part of the state, those of you across our state. Do you think your infrastructure needs have been met? Are your schools fully funded? Your schools are growing. More kids are coming into our state. We've got some great issues to deal with here. But have your needs been met? I would say no. There's more. We need to put more funding into infrastructure, into our education, into North Dakota. That's where this money should go right now.
All right, a familiar face with a question here.
Yeah, I'm Senator Bowman from Bowman, North Dakota. The question that I have, because I've seen the ads both for and against this, the ads for it, television ads are really good, really touches your heart. Is all the money coming to pay for those ads coming from the North Dakota people that support this? Or are any money coming from out of state? I think that's important to know.
Okay. I can address that, Senator. Are you a senator and a commissioner? Okay, wow. Impressive. I didn't realize that. Okay. The major proponent and the single largest funder of this campaign, and thank you, by the way, I'm glad you like the ads, continue to watch them, is Ducks Unlimited. Ducks Unlimited has a considerable presence in North Dakota. We've been doing business here for 50 years. We have a regional headquarters right here in Bismarck with 50 employees. We have 7,000, over 7,000, I think it's approaching 7,500 members in the state. We have a lengthy, long-term commitment to North Dakota's natural resources. The single largest contributor to the opposition's campaign is the American Petroleum Institute, which is a Washington, D.C. based lobbying firm.
Let's come down to this end quickly to balance.
Well, I think if you want to talk about what coalition or what side is more North Dakotan, I mean, I think we'll go back to the 360,000 farmers, the 288,000 employees, and I can give that list again. All our money that has come into our coalition has come from North Dakota. North Dakota taxpayers, North Dakota, the groups who employ people in North Dakota, who pay wages in North Dakota, who have a vested interest in North Dakota. The proponents are quick to talk about API coming in. API represents the energy industry. The energy industry is great in North Dakota. They have a lot of great members in North Dakota doing work in North Dakota. API has come in involved. Their involvement has been to make sure that money keeps flowing into the infrastructure, the education, and the needs we have in North Dakota. That's their responsibility, and that's why they're here. Whereas the proponents, 96% of their money that's gone into their coalition has come from out of state, not from North Dakota. They've got a lot of large individual donors who I'd be willing to bet have never been to North Dakota. It's an ideological bend for them. So I guess if we want to talk about dollars like that, we can. I'm very comfortable with where we're at in North Dakota, and the proponents have brought in a lot of money from outside of North Dakota to get to North Dakota taxpayer dollars. That's the big difference.
Again, as I meant.
Oh, Connie was first. Yep.
I handed over the microphone last, so okay, thank you. On the topic of where the money is coming from, I think you need just to look at what the motivation behind the money is. It appears to me, and again, I said I have not been associated with the coalition putting this together, but looking at their motivation, it appears to me that they are motivated to spend all of the money within North Dakota. So given that, even if they happen to be an organization that has a larger presence in the nation, like Ducks Unlimited or some of the others, the fact that they are choosing to spend the money and advocating for spending the money within North Dakota seems to me to be the relevant point. And contrarily, if you look at what the motivation is on the part of the oil industry, Mr. Godfread claims to know that they are only concerned about whether they get enough infrastructure spending out of the legislature. They may also have a different motivation, which is that they want their taxes reduced. They always want their taxes reduced. Their lobbyist has told me numerous times in the legislature that his primary job always will be to get their taxes reduced. So if we allocate money toward something else like this, it becomes less likely that they will get their taxes reduced. But you know what? They came to North Dakota to this very, very rich oil play with this 6.5% extraction tax in place. That money doesn't belong to the oil industry. That 6.5% was claimed by the people of North Dakota in 1980. It has passed constitutional muster. That money belongs to the people of North Dakota, who should be entitled to decide how it gets spent. It is not the industry's money. They are getting their infrastructure needs met, and they would get them met faster if our legislature weren't stashing the money in the Strategic Investments Fund and pretending that it's an allocation when it's not, when it's not being used appropriately. There is going to be, according to OMB estimates, $1.2 billion that will go into the Strategic Investment and Improvements Fund in this biennium, an estimate of more than $2 billion in the next biennium, and that is money, as I said, which the legislature chooses to say, we know it's coming in this biennium, but we're just going to sit on it and not think about how to spend it until the next biennium. So this is really a false choice that the opponents are making, and I hope they're making it in ignorance. I hope they're not lying. I want to believe they are making it in ignorance because they don't understand the budgeting process well enough, and that would be understandable because it's a complicated process and it's getting more complicated all the time. But the truth is, the legislature of North Dakota has plenty of money to fund education and roads and infrastructure and water and all the rest of it, and they are choosing to stockpile billions of dollars instead of meeting your needs. So don't let anyone tell you that there is not enough money to fund all of these things. There is and there will be.
We have another question, but Ron, did you have? Oh.
Yeah, I had a follow-up to that. 41,000 North Dakotans signed the petition to put Measure 5 on the ballot. Every person who votes on this on November 4th will be a North Dakota resident. Every dollar allocated to clean water, wildlife, parks, outdoor recreation, outdoor education for children will be done so within the four corners of North Dakota.
All right, sir, your question?
I heard a lot on CRP, and I think in our part of the country, in southwest North Dakota, down by Bowman, I farmed for 50 years down there. 20 years ago, we farmed about 3,000 acres. We seeded about 1,500, we summer fall 1,500. Within a matter of 4 or 5 years, we farmed it all. We've got more pheasants now, more geese, more ducks, more deer than we've ever had in our lifetime. And we've got more cover for them. I had one doctor tell me, you guys are ruining the whole country because you're tearing up the CRP. I said, we got better cover now than we've ever had.
Well, I don't consider myself either a liar or ignorant to the budgeting process, but regardless of how you view the budgeting process and whether you believe in conservative funding formulas or liberal funding formulas is irrelevant, regardless of how you believe those things agree. Nobody can disagree with this money comes out before anything else. And times are great now. In the next 25 years, our state is primarily funded by two international volatile commodities, ag and energy. And that is the reason that your legislators take a conservative approach to funding in North Dakota. And regardless of how you believe that funding should go, this money comes out before any of those decisions are made. This money comes off the top. This money gets priority over every other spending priority in the state. It comes out before it goes into the appropriations process. And that means that conservation goes ahead of schools, it goes ahead of infrastructure, it goes ahead of public safety, it goes ahead of higher ed. It goes ahead of tax relief, it goes ahead of everything that my constituents care about. It is the first thing off the top, and it is untouchable.
And just to piggyback on that as well, I think we've heard from Senator Triplett and her thoughts on the budgeting process and what goes on in North Dakota. There's 103 legislators, state legislators that have signed up to oppose this measure because they believe that is a choice. You have to make a choice between how do you fund infrastructure, education, and tax relief at the levels you need to get money back into North Dakota, or do you fund conservation at an elevated level that's that's ahead of NDSU? So there is a choice there. So you've heard from one senator who feels that there's plenty of money there, but I've got there's 103 other state legislators who feel otherwise. We've got 1,700 state and local officials who feel otherwise. So I think you need to keep that in mind when you're looking at it. And I encourage you to go talk to your own local official, go talk to your own legislators, and see what their thoughts are on it. I think there is certainly a choice that's coming in November, North Dakotans will have to make a choice on how do they rank their priorities. Do they want to put conservation ahead of education and infrastructure? That's the choice you'll have to make.
We've got about 5 minutes. Got about 5 minutes here, and then we'll take our final statement. So we have a couple more questions from the audience we'd like to get to Senator Triplett.
This will be quick. I want to just show people this chart from the Office of the State Treasurer, Kelly Schmidt, on how the North Dakota oil extraction tax is distributed. You can go to the website and find it on the formal website of the Treasurer's office. The oil extraction tax distribution, 20% of it goes to the Common Schools Trust Fund and Foundation Aid Stabilization Fund to support education, and that's also in the Constitution. 20% of it goes into the Resources Trust Fund, and that began as part of Measure 6, but is now ensconced in the state statutes. 30% of it goes to the Legacy Fund. That was a recent addition to the Constitution by the people of North Dakota. Then 30% of it goes to the general fund. And that, I believe, is what Senator Armstrong was saying when he says this will come off the top. It will come off the top of the general fund share, but those other pieces, the Legacy Fund, the Resources Trust Fund, and the Common Schools Fund, are all protected equally as this will be by our Constitution, this 5% will not in any way take priority over those other 3 protected funds. So just to clarify.
Yeah, I want to address the issue of education. Don't let anybody tell you that this takes money away from education, because it's simply not true. One of the express purposes of this fund is, and I'll read it to you, to create more opportunities and places for children to learn about and enjoy the outdoors. This has a unique and unprecedented funding mechanism for outdoor education for children. If your school district wants to improve and enhance its science curriculum and add sort of a nature science component to that, this fund is for them. This is a resource for teachers. If your school needs a new playground, if your school wants to enhance its Phi-Ed and additional outdoor opportunities for children, this is a resource for them. And many teachers are recognizing what an important resource this is for them, and that's one of the main reasons the big teachers union in North Dakota has not joined the opposition coalition. And it's one of the main reasons we have nearly 100 teachers across the state who have actually endorsed this measure. They see this as a resource for them. This is an important resource for education for our kids. I'm going to give you another number, $10 billion. $10 billion is the amount of oil and gas tax revenue that's estimated to be generated in the next biennium. With $10 billion, we don't have to make false choices between infrastructure, clean water, schools. We can do all of these things and do them well. We can have cops, schools, roads, tax relief, clean water, wildlife, and parks.
We are very limited on time that we have left, and I know that we have some county folks that have questions. It's very important we hear from our county folks. So the panelists, I'm going to ask you to just have one person respond to the next questions so we can try to get their questions answered. We're just going to start back here with Elsie.
Elsie Magnus. I'm in the northeast corner of the state in the beautiful Pembina Gorge area. A couple of years ago, we took our land out of CRP that had been there for 15 years. It broke my heart. That land was virgin soil by that time. It broke my heart. I'm a conservationist at heart, but we couldn't afford to leave it there. There's nothing in this measure that would say that we could go back to that. Our land is it goes right down into the gorge. But the other question, in the specific district that I'm in, our little township has lost a lot of tax revenue from land that was set aside and sold to other entities that for conservation purposes. Took it right off our tax. Our little township suffers with their township roads, and I just don't think that I'm concerned about that, and I don't see an answer to that in the text.
Okay, I can address a couple of things, and this gets to the question that the other gentleman had about, as a nuts and bolts factor, how would this work? Among the programs that are possibilities here are programs that could compensate you in an economically competitive way to keep that land in CRP, so you don't have to break your heart and take it out. I mean, it's basically among the programs, you know, that are absolutely possibilities. And it's one of the main things that has been discussed over and over again. What if we had some sort of a statewide conservation cover program that was tailored to the needs and the unique markets of North Dakota? And it would be administered, for example, by the North Dakota Department of Agriculture, and farmers would apply to participate for it. That's absolutely one of the possibilities that are within the realm of discussion here.
John? Ron?
Well, I think you bring up a great point with this land acquisition piece within this measure. You know, and when these groups come in and they do buy this land with a nonprofit land, it does go off the tax rolls, which does hit your local communities, which does affect, it has farther reaching consequences than I think the proponents care to address. So I guess I agree with your point that, you know, the CRP program or what are some of these other programs that we talked about, we don't need a constitutional measure with mandated spending to accomplish this stuff. We don't need that. We don't need a measure that'll fund their organization, their nonprofit organization, to be the overseer of some of these programs, to take some money off the top of taxpayer dollars to do these things. We can do this within the legislature, we can do it statutorily, and we can do it without having all the negative impacts within our local communities.
All right, we have another question in the back of the room, sir.
Yes. Randy Richards from Steele County. I've seen all the ads, and there are a lot of feel-good ads. I hear all the proposals about you're going to fund parks, you're going to fund bathhouses, you're going to help schools, you're going to do all this. I'm trying to understand that we all, as commissioners, we have park boards, we have funding mechanisms, there's CRP, there's all the programs you're talking about doing. You have no specifics, you have a lot of feel-good stuff. All the programs you're talking about doing, we already have all those programs within our society and our system right now. They need to be tweaked, we need to get more funds out. But why do we have to have a constitutional measure to appropriate these funds? We have everything in place, but you're telling us that you don't trust our legislature that they're going to be able to appropriate the funds eventually, and that we as commissioners and we as citizens of North Dakota can't go to our legislature and get them to release funds for the programs that we're in desperate need out here for roads and infrastructures. So you don't trust them, so you're doing an end run around us, hoping that us as citizens of North Dakota will buy into what you're trying to sell us on, that we can't do it ourselves, our legislators can't do it, so we're going to trust you and make a constitutional measure that you're going to handle our funds and you're going to get the money back to us. And I'm sorry, I don't believe you.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that this is, the initiated ballot measure process has a lengthy history. It is by and for the people. And historically, this is a sector of the economy that has not done well with the legislature. Honestly, if the legislature was paying attention to these issues in the way in which, you know, they could have been, we wouldn't be here. So without it, and we have a lengthy history in North Dakota of people going to the ballot box and using the initiated measure process. Our initiated measure process is 100 years old. We have a lengthy history. I'm not asking you to trust me, I'm asking you to trust North Dakota voters. And we have a lengthy history of empowering North Dakota voters and trusting them to make good decisions. And again, it will be elected officials, our 3 highest elected officials, making decisions on this: the Industrial Commission, the governor, the ag commissioner, and the attorney general will be making decisions. When you add the 4 legislators that are on the advisory committee, nearly half, 7 out of 16 of the people that will make decisions on this fund will be elected officials. There's a high level of public accountability here. And the funds, the types of programs that you're mentioning would be enhanced by this. Part of the proposal here in the option is to enhance existing programs, absolutely.
There is not a lengthy history of a $5 billion appropriation from the ballot box. And I think everybody always skips the most important step. If you don't like what your legislature is doing, elect new officials. If conservation is the #1 priority for the citizens of North Dakota and the legislature isn't doing what they want, elect new legislators. Don't appropriate $5 billion over 25 years at the ballot box that has no flexibility and comes off the top.
We'll do one quick question and quick answers, hopefully.
Hi, I'm Cindy Schwer from Barnes County, and I guess the question I have, whether it's CRP or parks or whatever this money goes towards, is there any long-term plan to maintain this from a county commissioner's perspective, we can put $100,000 into our park through a grant, but then when things start falling apart, it becomes a county maintenance nightmare. We don't have the funds to maintain all these fancy new things.
That's the type of thing that could be absolutely addressed in a grant proposal. I mean, in a grant proposal, I mean, absolutely the grant application could include and acknowledge that as a possibility and say that not only do we need the fund for the project, but the fund for ongoing maintenance. And that's something that absolutely could be included, and that would be up for the Industrial Commission to determine whether or not that was awarded. But, you know, having a comprehensive approach to that and recognizing the need for the long-term maintenance is something that could absolutely be anticipated in the granting process.
Would you care to respond?
I would just say that, again, I think there's a lot of ideas, but there's no short-term plan, so I don't know how there would be a real long-term plan.
Well, thanks for your great questions, for your time. Thanks to the North Dakota Association of Counties for hosting this debate. Hopefully you've come out of this with a little better idea as you approach the ballot box in the coming days. We want to give each of our panelists 1 minute, a final thought to summarize the Measure 5 and their perspective. And John, you have the microphone, so proceed.
Well, thanks again to the Association of Counties and KX for putting this on. Measure 5 really comes down to, you've heard a lot today on both sides, but it's going to come down to who do you trust? Who do you think has the best, North Dakota's best interest at heart? You know, North Dakotans for Common Sense Conservation, we've done our research, we've looked into the issues, we've come out and adamantly opposed Measure 5 for a lot of reasons that we talked about today. But we're joined by the governor, we're joined by the Ag Commissioner, we're joined by 103 legislators, we're joined by countless county commissioners, we're joined by business community across our state, we're joined by virtually every single ag association in our state, we're joined by educational leaders, we're joined by teachers, we're joined by common sense North Dakotans. So when you go to the ballot box on November 4th, you're going to have to make a choice. And I've talked about choices today. And the choice is, where do you want to put conservation as a priority? Do you want to put it ahead of North Dakota State University? Do you want to put it ahead of our infrastructure plans in North Dakota? Do you want to put it ahead of our education community? That's a choice you'll have to make, and I'm encouraging you to vote no.
I'll go next. Who do you trust? We trust North Dakota voters, and we trust our Industrial Commission and the people who will be on this very broad-based committee to make good decisions about how this will be administered. 41,000 North Dakotans signed the petition to put this on the ballot. Every dollar allocated to clean water, wildlife, parks, outdoor education, flood control will be done so within the four corners of North Dakota. We have 325 actual endorsements from all around the state, people representing farmers, teachers, healthcare professionals, organizations, businesses who have actually endorsed this measure because they think it's great for the future of North Dakota. If your school needs a new playground, Measure 5 is for you. If your school needs an adaptive playground, Measure 5 is for you. If you want more bike trails, walking paths, Measure 5 is for you. If your local park needs improvement, Measure 5 is for you. If you want to build a greenway to protect your community from seasonal flooding, Measure 5 is for you. If you spent last Saturday or Sunday driving around the countryside in a pickup looking for a place to hunt and had a tough time doing that, Measure 5 is absolutely for you.
Bottom line, you take $300 million now or $5 billion over the duration of this out of the pot of money that the legislature works with, somebody else loses. There's no other way around that. They've spent they're talking about $300 million with these glittering generalities on television. I have not seen one specific project with any teeth in it. And the third thing that I want you all to remember, if you want to think about your future, this is a slippery slope. If this group gets a constitutional percentage of income coming into North Dakota and mandate spending, you bet they're going to come out of the woodworks from now on.
I have 3 quick points I want to make. The first one is in response to one of the last questions about why we wouldn't trust our legislature. In Measure 6, one of the mandated spending items relatively minor one, was for energy conservation. And when I came to the legislature in 2005 and did some research, I realized that not a single penny had ever been spent out of the Resources Trust Fund for energy conservation, even though it was mandated by the people in that constitutional amendment. The legislature had simply ignored it. They put it into statute but never spent any money on it. It was 2013, last year, before the state finally put a couple of $1 million into energy conservation, which is a huge issue because 40% of energy goes to powering buildings. If we can save money on even our public buildings, as we now are proposing to do, that is huge for all of you who manage public buildings. And yet the legislature ignored that mandate for 43 years. So yes, there's a reason not to trust the legislature. Whoops, I'm being told my time is up, so with permission of the moderator, I will skip my one point and go directly to my last point, which is I just want to read to you one brief section from the North Dakota Constitution. Article 1, Section 2. All political power is inherent in the people. Government is instituted for the protection, security, and benefit of the people, and they have a right to alter or reform the same whenever the public good may require. This is a decision for the people of North Dakota, not all of the groups and organizations who pretend to represent them. One by one, this is for the people.
I think this measure takes a good idea, which is conservation, and takes it to a radical extreme. If this measure passes, they'll be delivering environmental activism with a fire hose to the tune of $3 million a week with mandated spending. There's little oversight, little accountability, and outside of being a bad idea, this is a recipe for inefficiency, fraud, and waste.
I'm not here for myself. I'm here simply because I care. I care about what's happening to this state. You know, it's often said that in your lifetime, you're only going to get 1 or 2 chances to truly make a difference. And I ask you, what are you going to tell your children and grandchildren? Are you going to make that difference or aren't you? Vote yes on Measure 5.
Well, thank you again to our panelists for this spirited debate. Thanks for your attention. We hope that it helps you make your decision as November quickly approaches. Again, if you're in town, so if you wanted to set your DVRs or take another look at this or tell some other folks that may want to be informed to watch, you can see it on 12-3 in Bismarck or Cable 591. And you can pass that along as well. But again, thanks to our panelists and the North Dakota Association of Counties for hosting this debate.